All right, we're going to start the meeting. I call this meeting to order 2 minutes early. And with that, roll call, Ms. Widener.
Dr. Campley?
Here.
Mr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Keenan?
Here.
Mr. Liggett?
Here.
Mr. McKinney?
Here.
Dr. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. Saylor?
Here.
Dr. Weston?
Here.
Ms. White?
1.03, 1.04, moment, Pledge of Allegiance followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okie dokie. 1.05 is the reading of the mission statement. We've gone all the way around. And so I will go ahead and, for the last meeting, read the mission statement. The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. 1.07, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
1.06 first.
Why do I skip it every time? I am so sorry. Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Against? And the motion passes. 1.07 is the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes for May 13th and June 3rd. Is
So
there
moved.
and a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. 1.08 was our special recognition for the month. 1.09 are comments on any topic. Anyone in the public that is a resident of the district can make a comment on any topic for 3 minutes by stating their name and their municipality. There is no one here this evening to join us, but I will open the floor if anyone would like to say anything else. Okay, moving along. Section 2, reports and presentations. 2.01 and 2.02 were our recognitions. 2.03 is our student liaisons report. They are in the midst of summer as we speak. 2.04, president's report. I have nothing. 2.05, Dr. Russell. No superintendent's report this week. 2.06, solicitor's report.
Sorry, no report this week.
Don't be sorry. 2.07 are board and district committee reports. Does anyone have anything to add? I don't think we've had anything since last week. I did want to discuss organization of committees, if we can take a second to do that. I wanted to just bring up the idea for discussion, whether or not we should discuss the idea of moving the education committee to a separate committee for next school year. I think that that would achieve some things in terms of efficiencies of that first Monday meeting. I know that the 3.5 hours the first Monday is enjoyable time spent together, but I do think that some of the education committee work would be best served in more of a communal conversational format. And I think marrying the switch of just the education committee, not the finance committee, I think that as a whole can stay during our first Monday meeting. But with Arthur Mitchell coming on to assist with the curriculum focus, I think it would be helpful to move back to individual committee. Does anyone have any comment, question, opinion? Dr. Weston?
I like the idea of a separate committee. I think it gives more opportunity for more participation, more in-depth discussion, rather than listening to a presentation and making comments at intervals. It makes it more of an interactive discussion. Also gives more of an opportunity for for the public to participate in the discussion as well. So I'd be happy with that change.
Anyone else? So back when the committee was that way previously, there was a lot more interaction. Like you said, there was more of a the way that Dr. Smith ran the meeting was much more like a listening session of sorts. There was always an activity, an icebreaker, that type of thing. So I think, you know, without having discussed it with Mr. Mitchell, I think that, I don't know how he would envision the meeting, but I think that is something that can be discussed. My curiosity is whether or not, even though it's going to come off of the first Monday meeting, would you prefer to keep it a committee of the whole and have the entire board invited to join? Or would you prefer for it to be a more traditional committee with 4 board members designated? Because I think that there was some, the feedback and the conversation around moving it to the whole was lack of the ability to have every board member have voice during the education committee portion, and then duplication of information was also part of the discussion. So I don't know if there's an opinion about that either. Dr. Russell, I mean, you're as well, weigh in, please.
I would,
Mr. Fountain.
the one thought that I would have, and I can't pull my mic any closer.
No,
so,
you have to, we can hear you.
but the one thought I would have is that I do like the idea of having all board members available to go. Not necessarily would all of them make it every time.
Yeah.
But I think the opportunity of being able to all attend is important.
And advertise that way, that would be acceptable, correct?
Yes.
So you wouldn't, it wouldn't be mandatory attendance as a committee, but it would be open to all board members.
We could set it up that way, yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm personally fine with that. I mean, I think the content is, it just deserves more in-depth conversation, and unfortunately, I don't think we started the education portion of the meeting last week until like 9:30 or something like that. Yeah.
So it does mean another night out for board members.
Means
and
another night
that-
out.
That can be tough. That can be challenging with schedules. So that's what we're weighing it against, really. Either one long night or another night out.
Have you had the chance to talk to Mr. Mitchell about the option of that, or?
I have not. I think a district committee with board representation is more typical.
Yeah.
It's more common. But I haven't had a chance to talk to him, but I will. And then maybe what the board would consider is starting out as a committee of the whole, see how it goes, and then if you want to shift it after the reorg or something, you could consider that as a board too.
Okay.
You know, I think part of the challenge for us was not everybody felt like they had all the information. So there was a lot of replication or redundancy in an effort to bring everybody up to speed on what was being discussed or would be presented. That was the advantage of the Education Committee of the whole.
I do like the idea of having it on a separate meeting, because I like the idea of the community having more input in things, just like the shift with the policy committee. I just think it allows for more transparency in the community, just being involved in that whole process a little more. So I like the idea of making it a separate meeting.
I like the option of having, I like the option of having it open where it can be, you know, if you can't make it, it's not a big deal, but we have the option of everybody coming and having a voice. I think that's important. I mean, I know we can go to any of the policy meetings and speak, but sometimes it gets a little dicey as to, is this an appropriate time to speak or not an appropriate time to speak? When are you considered community, or when does it, or when is it being viewed as, are you speaking as a board member?
You're speaking as a board member, and you can't deliberate if there's a quorum.
Well,
but
that's
it
what I'm
is
saying, like, when
difficult.
you go to
it's
the other ones, you're
challenging.
trying to speak as a community member, but then it can be dicey as
Third
to,
line, right?
yeah, it can be blurry. And I feel like, I honestly wish we could do this for all of them, that you can come and have conversation and have, because it's easier to go to meetings and hear it firsthand than to try and read committee notes, quite frankly. And when there's things that we're really trying to deliberate on that we feel like we need to hear it firsthand and not get the piecemeal piece, we want to be able to go to the meeting and hear it and ask questions.
Yeah.
And that takes that blurred line away. So I personally appreciate that approach.
I mean, and honestly, some of it has to do with the obligation, the time obligation, you know, to have everyone available for every meeting is it is a remarkable amount of time, but to have the option to tag out is also helpful.
Well, since it's a committee meeting, it technically doesn't have a quorum requirement to begin with. And so if we weren't able to make it, I mean, it technically doesn't count against you. I think the opportunity for all of us to engage at the committee level with the understanding that deliberation actually is not going to be taking place at the committee meeting. That is a place where we're just discussing, and technically we will be passing it up to ourselves later.
That's right. So the overview during that first meeting would be an education presentation with committee recommendations or, the happenings of the meeting or something like that. I'm envisioning it myself.
Correct, and I think that's different from policy, because at policy, there's more, I would say, deliberation between the members of the board members of the committee. So there's things that are being, they're not formally voted on, but it is definitely more of a sense of the committee, and it's a more formal atmosphere. I think the education committee lends itself to discussion, and
It's more interactive,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
so I think we could do this and do it successfully.
Okay, and to Dr. Sadler's point, during the committee of a whole education presentation, there still was an opportunity for the community to weigh in and speak. It was a different, more formal environment of engagement, as opposed to really almost like a teaching session. So it was a different feel, but there was still an opportunity for community input. Okay, if everybody's good with that, then that was the only off-script thing I had to bring up tonight. All right, and then we're moving on.
So we will work to advertise the committee meetings. We'll talk about a date. a
Yeah, I
night
don't know if we
with
have a
you.
first meeting yet.
No, we don't,
Okay.
but I'll talk about that with you and Mr. McKinney when we meet to plan the agenda the next time.
Great.
And we'll get those dates on the calendar and advertised.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. By then, Mr. Miller will be able to weigh in as well. Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry, will be able to weigh in. Okay, so then that brings us to section 3, approval of the consent agenda. Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Alrighty, consent agenda is approved. Dr. Campley?
Okay, 4.01 was on June 3rd. 4.02, 03, and 04 were all on consent. 4.05 is the approval to purchase the SIPS reading intervention. We talked about it a little bit last week, so I don't know if there's someone to kind of speak to it a little bit more this evening, or Dr. Russell, do you have more to add to that?
I do have a little bit more. And in speaking with our humanities supervisor, really this is for the purpose of supporting students who are struggling to be on level with their reading. And if you look at some of our PSSA data, there is a percentage of our students who are unable to demonstrate proficiency. And that's not the only data point that we look at. And really what's at the root of it, in the eyes of Mrs. Horenko, is for a long time we were employing balanced literacy. And when students were learning to read, at the time our middle schoolers were in the early grades, they would often be encouraged to look at the pictures to help them figure out a word. They looked for clues that were not about letter sounds or sounding out letters or developing phonemic awareness, the way that the science of reading and structured literacy is now encouraging us to do. So this resource would help fill the gaps for some of those students who learned reading that way and continue to struggle in some respect at this point. This will help close the gap and get them caught up to where they need to be. So that's the idea behind it. It really is a difference in the approach to develop those early literacy skills.
So I just have a question then. I understand, the method to reading, how reading, the levels of learning. Foundations has been part of the curriculum for a long time now, long before this middle school group got to middle school. Foundations focused on the phonemic awareness and should have been targeting that portion, and that was not, the focus was not balanced literacy once they moved to foundation. So I'm just a little concerned. I still feel like, I'm a little concerned about middle schoolers that need basic phonemic awareness instruction as getting an intervention. And I'm not saying we don't get them this intervention, and this is probably not even a conversation that goes with buying a resource. But my concern is child find and students that do not have phonemic awareness skills come middle school. Why are they not being tested for special education services by now? And why are they not being picked up for that support? Because that is a skill that should not be, I mean, it's a pretty significant skill to not be had by middle school.
I agree, and I appreciate your comment. And last week, Mrs. Harenko would have liked to have shared, but didn't. Some of the students that will be served are identified as special education students. This is not just, so that's a really important point. It's not just for general education students. And actually, Foundations was implemented by Dr. Sally Hildebrand, if you remember Sally. We were employing balanced literacy at that point. So that was a way to complement or supplement the development of early reading skills with that whole language approach and that balanced literacy. So there was a combination there, but the balance wasn't what it needed to be. And some of these students continue to struggle. Some of them are special education students. So that's an important point.
And that makes me feel more comfortable, because last week it was presented as part of something that would be during IE time for the
Right.
general education population. So to hear that it's being used with special education students, that makes more sense to me
Yes.
than a general ed student who hasn't yet been identified, because that to me is a big red flag.
Yes, I agree.
So that makes me much more comfortable. Because, you know, I have a soon-to-be senior, and she was a foundation, she didn't get balanced literacy, and I'm like, I know when the switch kind of happened, because I was here, I taught the balanced literacy, I just missed when Sally switched it to foundation. So, I do feel more comfortable hearing that, so that does make me, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. I appreciate the point.
Yeah, that definitely was my question with not approving the resource if it's needed. It was more along the lines of the number of students that this was a red flag, and that would have been helpful to see what students would be benefiting and where they fell, because they're obviously getting an intervention right now if they have an IEP.
Correct.
Right.
That's correct. And so this is a more targeted intervention. So remember, we're really trying to address the needs of our students as we get better at identifying those. So some students struggle with fluency and spend a lot of time trying to read and sound out words, which makes it more difficult over time to comprehend the text. So this is an effort to get our students caught up and address those needs in those that are demonstrating this will benefit them. And some are general ed, some are special ed. I can actually get numbers for you if that would be helpful. And even during the I&E period, special education students are going to be receiving an intervention.
Yeah, that's
That-
what I was gonna
that-
actually say. Is it like a tier, is it being used as a tier 2 or tier 1 type of intervention? Because all students are placed in a level of intervention during that IE or intervention block. So whether kids have IEPs or not, they're all targeted to some level of an intervention, either tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So my question after listening to you was going to be, is it a intervention for tier 2 or tier 1 to support students?
Right, because if it's tier 1, you have to kind of wonder why it's not really shouldn't be a tier 1 intervention.
I figure, I don't know, if it's a tier 2 type of intervention.
Yeah, I mean, to me, listening to you now, it makes me think this is those kids who Wilson or Orton Gillingham are going to be too intensive. They're maybe on the cusp. So this is your next level. We do a SIPS to help. But again, I get it now. I feel better. I probably have too much knowledge and ask too many questions because of my training in this particular realm. It just bothered me a little bit. I feel better. So I'm willing to make a motion to approve the SIPS reading
I still have some
intervention.
questions, I'm
Oh, sorry. I didn't see you.
Do we still use the 3 queuing system? No. When did we
We
stop
do
using
not.
it?
I don't know exactly when, but as more and more information has come out around structured literacy, and we were granted the grant through Senator Muth this year, so there's really been an intense focus for us as part of that pilot. But in recent years, that research has emerged and it's come to the forefront a little bit more, so we've been focusing more on that. We don't use the 3 queuing system anymore.
When did we use it?
Well, when I was a principal at Skipback, we used it in the early 2000s. I can't tell you exactly when we shifted away completely from that. I can find out. But
We haven't used it for some time.
I can't tell you exactly when we stopped. What I can tell you is we are much more focused on phonemic awareness and phonics, letter sounds, in helping our students develop early literacy.
So if we don't currently use a 3 queuing system, why was that? What's that information telling us?
I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
understand that question, how you asked it.
What,
Information provided, we're on 4.05, correct?
Correct.
The information provided
Yep.
to the board is about the 3 queuing system.
that's right, because these middle school students were exposed to that in their early years in elementary school. We were still employing that.
Well, that's what so you said when you were a principal at Skipback, those students weren't in elementary school at
That's
that
right.
time.
But I also said, I don't know when we transitioned completely away from that. I don't know, but this is what Mrs. Haranko believes is contributing to some of the challenges our students are experiencing.
So, but if we're talking about these middle school students, we're talking about something that's happened within the past 6 or 7 years, correct? We went from a system and we started doing 3 queuing systems.
Well, I do think, to be fair, like I know we did, the Foundations was implemented and we started moving the focus instead of being one whole pendulum swing to balanced literacy, which took us whole word reading and took us too far one-sided. We kind of started to bring the pendulum back and introduce Foundations and get more back into the phonemic awareness, and we research and literature, and when I say we, educators in general is what I'm referring to, not PV. We realized that you need a combination of both, and as we got more and more research and into the science of reading, realized that it is very systematic. You need to have the foundational skills first. But as teachers who have been teaching over the years, they have this whole big toolkit of learning. There are teachers that kind of take bits and pieces. So even if they are using Foundations and they're using the curriculum, you know, they still may do pieces of balanced literacy when they're doing their read aloud. They may still be telling their kids, let's do sketch to stretch. Let's do, you know, different verbiage when they're doing those read alouds to help kind of
So-
build on reading
Yeah.
comprehension. So I think that could be part of it, is that some of these kids had, as it was transitioning, they had a mixed bag of both. Now the district is saying a hard stance on, we are going to do the science of reading and we are switching completely and we're not going to have the mixed bag, is
Well-
what I'm understanding.
So I'm not an educator. I'm a parent. And what I'm reading as a board member is a select group of students were guinea pigged out to try a system. Because at some point in time, research showed that the 3 queuing system was better than what we were doing, that public education was doing previously. And now we're learning that, hey, when we taught that queuing system, we actually slowed down a student's ability to functionally learn to read properly, as research shows now. It says it right here, that it stunted the educational growth. So my concern, and I brought this up on other things before, we always like to say research shows. Well, it shows it until it doesn't, and it's pretty clear that research showed that the 3 queuing system should be implemented, and we did that in PV, and now we're saying it's not, and we've created some form of deficit from that system, because that's what the board was presented, that research now shows that this was bad to do, right? So, you know, the technique of phonetics and teaching students to read worked in, you know, it worked for years. What makes what we're doing now, because we're basing off of research that this is going to work, how do we know that 5 years down the line we're not going to get another report that says it didn't work, what we tried didn't work?
We might. That's the way it works. I mean, at the time, balanced literacy was believed to be an effective way to teach reading. For some kids, it wasn't. And these are the kids we're going to try now by expanding the net with something that focuses on what research today is telling us really supports literacy development, strengthens fluency, and then that leads to greater comprehension. But it could change. That's what happens in education. It does change. We try to make the best decisions based on the information we have at the time. And balanced literacy was around for a long time because it was supported in the industry. Now we know more kids develop reading skills more effectively with a focus on phonemic awareness and phonics.
So I guess my impression, based on what Mr. Saylor said, and then with what you said, Dr. Russell, along with what we were presented in terms of the reasoning, is more or less that it's not a black and white situation, that every time a new resource or a new curriculum guide, like Math in Focus or whatever the what's the word? The focus happens to be, whatever the major subject happens to be, it creates a new thought process for how to implement the instruction. But teachers in general, because they're not robots, it's never black and white, they only do this or they only do that. They pick a toolbox and they put a kit together of how to reach students with the information. Is that a better understanding of this is what we did, this 3 queuing system? Because I can't imagine that this was like an all or nothing. They only did this. They never took any past practice into account.
It wasn't the only thing, but it really was promoted as a way to teach students how to read. At the same time, we had a curriculum director who really was forward-thinking and implemented foundations. And we were one of the first districts to implement foundations along with this approach relative to other districts in the county, for example. They didn't have it as part of their curriculum. It was a supplement for students who really needed targeted support when they were learning how to read. We gave it to everybody in the early grades. And that was something that really I attribute to Dr. Sally Hildebrand, who at the time, like I said, was really forward-thinking and making that effort to strike the right balance.
So maybe I'm reading too much. I'm confused. You want this to pass, the information to the board is focused on 3 queuing system. When I read this, I focused on the line that says the research came to understand that the 3 queuing system actually teaches students to be poor readers, which
Right.
kind of like my mind exploded that we were teaching students to be poor readers. But you're saying we don't use this system anymore.
We do not. We do not. We do not ask students, do you think it's a noun or a verb, this word you're up to? Does the picture help you? What does the first letter sound like? We don't ask those questions. Instead, we focus on phonemic awareness.
So why was this a talking point into getting a yes vote out of a board member?
Last week, there were questions about it and its purpose and who it was going to serve and why we needed it at the middle school.
No, I got that. I watched the meeting thereafter, but it wasn't focused on this system that we don't teach anymore.
You're right. And I think
I'm just trying to confirm yes or no, like we don't teach this system anymore.
we do
like
not teach
no one
reading
teaches
via
that.
the 3 queuing system. We do not. Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And I think that's important to note, so.
As a follow-up, would you be able to actually, because not every strategy works for every child, actually point out the number of students, the percentage, or like how many students are we really trying to, who was this not working for?
Okay.
Because we have remarkable readers. We have very high achieving students in language arts. So there is a portion that are not, that need intervention. But so to say that that system didn't work for anybody is all, I just feel like that's not a black and white. Yes, it says that, but it's not a black and white science of.
And that's exactly right. So when you're talking about the science of reading, developmentally, some students naturally, developmentally, they pick up the skills as they developmentally are hitting appropriate stages with the way it's presented to them. What is found is some students don't necessarily pick it up that way, and they need a directed type of instruction. Science is showing us that those students tend to do better when we focus more on the phonemic awareness piece than when we focus on the reading comprehension and the cueing piece, which was more what the idea was. Well, if we can have them focus on the comprehension, they can get past the words they don't know and it'll come to them. It is shifted to say that doesn't work because when the material gets to be so exponentially more difficult, they're not getting the higher level words and content.
Because they can't put them together.
Because they can't put
phonemically.
it together phonemically.
Understood.
So that's,
right.
yeah.
I was kind of reading between the lines there. I didn't take it so literally because of the poor readers part, because I know we don't have a
Yeah,
whole.
But that's So there's a lot, but there are some students who do pick up developmentally the decoding and the phonemic awareness and only struggle on the comprehension piece. And for those students, teachers will pick up things like 3Qing types of techniques, not the 3Qing system.
That was my point, right.
That they'll use as ways to help them, like SQ3R, for example, to help them support their actual reading comprehension.
Understood.
You have to know which area of reading the student's struggling in. And that, again, it comes down to science, and it will change over time, because with any science, we learn, we grow, we change, and the students in front of us change. These kids look different than they did 20 years ago. The way that they're learning is different. They are accessing material differently. They're not sitting and getting their instruction. A lot of them are going home and they're on video games, or they're listening to stories on, headphones. They're not necessarily getting as much exposure to the written word, which then that means they need more direct instruction then back again, and it changes the science of reading. So, there's a lot of pieces, and my only downfall here, and the only reason I gave any pushback, was I just wanted to make sure we were not missing students and that needed special education services, because it sounded like we were using it as a general education intervention solely.
I agree that it was presented that way. That was my impression as well. Dr. Russell, what's a reasonable amount of time to have kind of a snapshot of whether or not there's been improvement or movement after implementation?
I would say we assess our students a couple of times a year. Probably halfway through the year, we may have an indication of how this resource is supporting some of our struggling readers. 3/4 of the way or 2/3 of the way through the year. So we can report back on that.
Could we make a note to have that
Sure.
touch point?
Yes,
I would be curious
absolutely.
to just, and then along with the numbers of, I just think that would be really helpful to put it into some context, further context.
Any other questions before I make a motion? Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve the SIPS reading intervention resource.
Second.
A motion and a second. Are there any further comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, motion passes.
4.06, 07, 08, 09 are all on consent. On 4.10, we took action on the 3rd, and same with 4.11. 4.12, 13, and 13 were on consent, and 4.14 we did on June 3rd. So that ends my section.
Thank you, Dr. Campley. Mr. Fountain, business.
Okay. 5.01 was taken care of last week. 02, 03, 04, 05 are all on consent. 06, action was taken last week. 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all are on consent. 517 is a motion to approve purchasing and financing for operations, vehicles, custodial equipment, and technologies. Now, is there any discussion about that?
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Or is there, I guess we'll just give one last opportunity for discussion. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
Okay, 518, also a motion for approval of Apple lease for a high school Mac lab upgrade. Is there any discussion before that is up for a vote? Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. One more opportunity. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
All right, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26 are all on consent. 527 was removed from the agenda. 5.28, there is no report. 5.29 is approval for a motion to approve the purchase of playground equipment for Evergreen Elementary.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? My only question is whether or not there's a timeline for installation. Is it targeted before school starts, or?
So right now.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was looking at Joe. That was my fault, Jim. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm working with the vendor now to finalize.
Okay, so for the record, because I don't think you're mic'd, you're working with a vendor to finalize pricing, and you're gonna do most of the installation in-house with our own employees to keep the removal, okay, the removal portion. So there will be, an update, I guess, to the board as a front line, to give us a timeline as far as when the installation would take place. But I'm assuming you're targeting prior to the beginning of the school year.
So I don't think we can get that done before the start of the school year.
Okay,
We are bringing Mr. Marsh in as our newly appointed Evergreen principal
okay,
to help us carry the ball. So it will be some time until we get that playground in position. We have to
Okay.
we have to bid it out. It's on CoStars, but we have to go through the process, thin it out, make sure that what is in the original quote, which was way higher than what we're looking at now, that we can fit it into the current not-to-exceed number.
okay. So when you're finalizing pricing, you don't mean you have pricing in front of you. You're gonna be working with Mr. Marsh to create a vision for what that will be, so.
Exactly.
Okay, so there will be an update in August.
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted to understand the not-to-exceed number is basically just to keep you moving forward and not necessarily to pull the trigger for anything.
that is correct.
Is this to be a complete overhaul of the playground equipment at Evergreen, or is
It
this?
is, and we're basing the design and the equipment for what we did at South as our standard to move forward. The original quote was, hey, let's have at it, and of course it reflected, hey, let's have at it. It was north of $300,000 and some odd thousand. So we didn't have the time to go through that process with Sharon as she moved out of that position. So this is a placeholder, reminds us we're going to keep working on it to move forward with it as quickly as possible.
So we'll look forward to a further update, but in the meantime, a motion and a second, and we'll go ahead and vote then if nobody has anything else. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, and last but not least, 5.30, a motion to approve the purchase of office furniture for the district office.
Is there a motion? Oh, or did you, you made the motion?
Now, I was gonna check and see if there was any discussion, and then the motion.
I'll
began.
check after the second if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Okay,
Second.
okay, motion and
Yeah.
a second, any
Point
discussion?
of order, that's the proper way of doing it anyhow, is to have the motion
Thank
and
you,
then the
Mr.
discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Liggett. No, no worries, no worries. So a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Okey dokey, let's keep it chugging forward then. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
And that completes my section.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fountain. Mr. Keenan, payment of bills.
We have 6.01, which was on consent. 6.02, I make a motion for ratification of bills and payroll and authorization of payments.
Thank you. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against?
All right, then we have 6.03, I make a motion to approve the treasurer's report and financial statements.
Okay, there's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
That ends my section.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keenan. Mr. McKinney, professional personnel.
Yes, so 701 is on consent, 702 on consent, 703 on consent, 704 on consent. 705 is approval of administrative appointments. I make a motion.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I think Mr. Moran is going to go ahead and speak, and then we will discuss and vote.
Okay, good evening. Well, we have not one, not two, but three administrative positions this evening that we are extremely excited to introduce to our school community and school board of directors. So I'm excited to introduce to our community our recommendation for the middle school east assistant principal position, Ms. Kim Harris, and the Middle School West Assistant Principal position, Ms. Courtney Garrett. Both, unfortunately, were unable to be here this evening. Ms. Garrett is on her family vacation this week, and Ms. Harris is enjoying a celebration over at South Elementary School this evening. It is Spirit Night. Both send their thanks to the school community and the school board. Both bring a wealth of experience, dedication, and passion for education that will greatly benefit our school communities. Ms. Harris is currently finishing her 9th year teaching 5th grade. 8 of those last 9 years have been at South Elementary School. Ms. Harris holds a Master's of Education in Educational Leadership from Cabrini University and a Bachelor of Science in Middle Level Education from Eastern University. Ms. Harris holds certification in all subjects, grades 4 to 6, mathematics and English language arts, grades 7 and 8, and her principal K-12 certification. As a classroom teacher, Ms. Harris has served on the Positive Behavior Supports School Leadership Team, a student council, faculty leader, Reading Olympics school coordinator, and a math and ELA curriculum writer. Her commitment to fostering a positive school culture and her experience in curriculum development will be invaluable as she steps into her new role at Middle School East. Ms. Garrett joins us with extensive experience in middle school education. She has spent the past 9 years teaching middle school mathematics at Upper Moreland Middle School and 1.5 years with the School District of Philadelphia. Ms. Garrett holds certifications as a principal, mathematics grades 7 through 12, middle school English and science grades 7 through 9, and elementary education grades K to 6. Throughout her career, Ms. Garrett has taken on various leadership roles, including math curriculum leader, mathematics department leader, dean of students, and an intervention specialist. Her expertise in mathematics education and her leadership experience will greatly contribute to our school's academic programs and student support services. We are confident that both Ms. Harris and Ms. Garrett will bring new passion and perspectives to our school. Their combined experience, dedication to student success, and leadership abilities make them excellent additions to our administrative team. We welcome Ms. Harris to Middle School East and Ms. Garrett to Middle School West. In addition, this evening, we have Dr. Zachary Fuller. He is here joined with his parents who are here to enjoy this celebration with us this evening. So thank you for being here both. Dr. Zachary Fuller is our recommended candidate for the high school lead principal position. Dr. Fuller was selected after an extensive and highly competitive search process. During the final stage of the interview process, groups of our students, parents, guardians, staff, and administrators, as well as 2 of our school board representatives, had the opportunity to engage with Dr. Fuller. Throughout this process, stakeholders highlighted Dr. Fuller's focus on high-quality instruction, student engagement, and student voice, as well as diversity and equity. Dr. Fuller earned his Bachelor of Arts in Theater and English Education from the University of Maryland. He later pursued a Master of Science in Administration and Supervision of Schools from Johns Hopkins University, and most recently, he earned a Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership from Gwynedd Mercy University. Dr. Fuller brings 22 years of experience serving public schools as an educational leader. He began his teaching career with the Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, where he served students for 5 years as a middle-level English teacher. Notably, Dr. Fuller served as the 8th grade humanities team leader in the Humanities and Communication Magnet program. He then relocated back to Pennsylvania, where he served as the high school teacher for 4 years at his alma mater, Central Bucks School District. In 2011, Dr. Fuller began his administrative career, serving 4 years as a high school assistant principal with the East Penn School District, 2 years as a middle school principal with the Palisades School District, and the past 7 years as a middle school principal with the Springfield Township School District. Dr. Fuller's extensive background as a teacher, leader, and building administrator in diverse educational settings makes him a tremendous asset to our students, staff, school community, and leadership team. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Fuller to the PV community and look forward to the positive impact he will undoubtedly bring. So thank you.
Thank you. That was a motion and a second, and I appreciate, for the record, and I'm sure the community does as well, the overview and biography of each of our new administrators joining our team here at Perkiomen Valley. So with that, I will ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Congratulations, Dr. Fuller. And also, who else are we congratulating? Mrs. Harris and Mrs. Garrett. I appreciate very much that you've decided to join us, and we really look forward to what's next for the high school. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. McKinney.
706, 707, 708, 709, 710, and 711 are all on consent, and that concludes my session.
Beautiful. Dr. Weston, support personnel.
Thank you. Items 8.01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 06 are all on consent. 8.07 is a request to ratify the summer 2024 LIFT program support appointments as listed. The recommended action is a motion to ratify, and I so move.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
Item 8.08, the approval of the Perkiomen Valley Educational Support Personnel Association Agreement. This is a request to approve a 3-year collective bargaining agreement between the Perkiomen Valley School Board and the Perkiomen Valley Educational Support Personnel Association, effective to July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. Recommended action is a motion to approve, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any conversation? Okay. We thank PVSD for all of their good faith negotiating, and we really look forward to executing this agreement with them. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
And that concludes Section 8.
Wonderful. Section 9, Mr. Liggett.
Thank you. Section 9.01, first reading of policies. There are 7 policies that have been posted for first reading. 9.02, the second reading of the policies for this week has passed on consent, and we took action last week on 9.03. That ends my section.
Thank you, Mr. Liggett. And that brings us to Section 10, closing items. It is 7:46. 10:01, comments or questions from the audience? Anything? All right, seeing none. 10.02, comments from board members. Dr. Russell.
I just want to thank the board for another great school year. I think students, based on the feedback I've received, and staff had a really enriching and rewarding school year. They're looking forward to summer, but they really did have a good year. So thank you for all of your support of what happens for our students. And I also want to thank the committee members that supported PVSD negotiations on behalf of the board. That was very productive, and I think I'm very appreciative of your considerations for that group. So thank you. Have a nice summer.
I echo that. I just want to say thank you to all of you. Have a nice summer, have a restful summer, and we will see everyone in August. Anyone else? Okay, seeing nothing else. 10.03, notice of video disclaimer, and 10.04 is adjournment. Everyone enjoy their summer. Oh, wait, one more thing. Dr. Boyd, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're gonna miss you very much. Okay, that's it.